Welcome to the third edition of the Big Ten Sports Podcast. My name is Andrew Wade. I am currently an editor at Dear Old Gold, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Ryan Thielen. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Andrew. Happy to be back for our third podcast and first one that hopefully gets posted.
Yeah, so we've had some issues, but I think this time we finally figured it out. We know how to actually do a podcast, and we know how to talk into microphones now, so that's exciting.
Yep, I think we're nailing it.
Third time's a charm.
Hope
So let's go ahead and get started. This was an awesome weekend of college football, and it reminded me of why I actually do enjoy college football. Sometimes I get jaded by my love for the Broncos, but this week was fantastic watching the ridiculousness that happened in college football, including some of the Big Ten games. So one of the things we wanted to cover is, no one was able to listen to us last week talk about our betting, but Ryan is a degenerate gambler, and I somehow get brought into all of his gambling schemes. And so one of the big things we'll be doing on a weekly basis is betting on each of the Big Ten games to see who is going to win at the end of the season. And surprisingly, Ryan, we did pretty well this week.
Yeah, so one, I'm not a degenerate gambler, and it's not gambling if you're good at it. But yeah, I knew that I was going to do pretty well, but I was surprised that you weren't as terrible as I expected. So yeah, with the games that we got to bet on, we missed the Thursday game, obviously, or the Thursday games. But both of us went 7-3 against the spread last week, which is pretty good. So yeah, I think the one that surprised me the most that I lost was the Penn State game. I know that you somehow picked Appalachian in that game, and they almost took the game outright. So was kind of surprised by that. We both picked Michigan to beat Notre Dame. And then I missed the Indiana game. And you, for some reason, along with the rest of the country, continue to overrate Texas and picked them to beat Maryland by quite a bit. And Maryland actually took that game outright. But overall, yeah, 7-3 each is a pretty strong start.
In my defense, I wasn't overrating Texas. I was underrating Maryland. So I'm not a big Texas fan, but I really thought they could come in and just destroy Maryland. But I'll just toot my horn for Appalachian State. You gotta always go with the Mountaineers. So,
But
so
kudos to them.
yeah, on the weekend we went 7-3 against the spread each, so that's exciting. I think we'll need to get a trip to Vegas soon if my wife allows it, and maybe play some bets because apparently I don't suck as bad at this as I thought I did. So that's cool.
Early days.
So going into some of these, the quick highlights from last weekend. Not a lot of really awesome games going on, but let's just go through some of the big things. So Wisconsin wins big. Not really any shocker there. Jonathan Taylor continued his Heisman run. Yeah, Illinois narrowly avoids the loss after a 21-point comeback in the third quarter to win 31-24.
Yeah, that was a weird game. Like they were losing 17-3 and then took the lead. And I think we won't talk about Illinois very much, so I'll get the plug in now. They're going to be as bad as we thought they were going to be. It's not going to be a pretty season for them.
Yeah. So quick question for you. What is Texas State's mascot?
Bobcats.
Nice. Well, the Bobcats got freaking smoked by Rutgers. Did you actually know that?
Yeah, man.
Okay, that's just impressive. All right. Well, you and 10 other people outside of anyone who's actually went to Texas State knew that the Texas State Bobcats got their butts kicked. And then our favorite QB1, Tate Martell, got some playing time in Ohio State's victory over Oregon State. Did you get a chance to watch some of his plays?
I did. So he got in the first half, I think, through 2 passes. He was a solid 3 for 4 on the day total with 33 yards. But he is athletic, so he did some things with his legs. Haskins looked great, though. So unless he goes down with an injury, your boy Tate Martell is not going to be seeing the field very much unless they continue to beat teams by 40 points. So probably get some playing time, but he's still what he is and isn't going to see the field too much.
I just want to call out one play where he ran through the defense and then made some random throw to his left side while getting just smacked by a defender, and they got a first down, which is just picture perfect Tate Martell. And I think as we'll talk later on, there's a good chance he's playing this weekend as well. So Maryland beats an overrated Texas team, as we already talked about. I don't know if you saw the first play of the game, but it was pretty cool watching Maryland take that penalty, and then Texas, declining, which I thought was a classy move, but pretty sweet to see when sports can bring people together like that.
Yep. Yeah, and it reminded me of last year when Nebraska lost their punter Sam Cole. They did a similar thing, and their opponent also just declined the penalty. And it is nice to see that sports is why people are watching, but there are bigger things in the world.
Absolutely, but none bigger than Nittany Lions almost losing to Appalachian State. That would have been quite the upset. The game was fantastic to watch. Appalachian State almost had that. They were up by a touchdown with 1:47, and somehow Penn State pulled some crap out of their butt and scored with 57 seconds left, and obviously took it home in overtime. But man, that would have been quite the upset to begin the season for Penn State.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to watch Penn State this year because everybody's high on McSorley after Saquon Barkley leaves, and he, to me, I don't know what your thoughts were, but to me, it didn't look like he was going to be, the quarterback that people think he is. Completion percentage was under 60, only threw for one touchdown. Did have a couple rushing scores, but against a defense like Appalachian State, I would expect more from a quarterback that some people were considering a Heisman candidate.
Yeah, I think the Heisman Trophy talk was a little bit ridiculous to me, and I don't mean this to make fun of Nebraska, but he reminds me of a guy who'd be really good at Nebraska running the triple option. He's not really a thrower; he's just athletic. But
so
when
Nebraska hasn't run the triple option for about 20 years, but keep going.
All I can think about is Eric Crouch, though, when I see him. So
Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Eric Crouch. But keep going.
Anyways, speaking of Heisman Trophy winners or lack thereof recently, Michigan lost to Notre Dame. I think this honestly begs the question, is Notre Dame for real, or are both teams just bad? I
don't know if bad's the right word, but to be honest, I wasn't overly impressed with either team. I think Michigan's going to be who we think Michigan is. I had high hopes that they were going to actually have an offense this year. I don't really have that hope anymore. But their defense is going to be one of the better defenses in the country. Notre Dame, I think, is still probably a 2 or 3 loss team. They play some decent teams down the road, but I just wasn't overly impressed by either squad, really.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know you're going to hate when I say this, but an interesting fact came out the other day that Michigan actually has the same number of wins as Iowa since Jim Harbaugh's been at Michigan. I thought that was pretty interesting because Iowa's never in the top 25, and Michigan's consistently in the top 15. So
you got to think it could potentially just be people overrate teams like Michigan and Texas. And if you watched the Florida State Virginia Tech game last night, Florida State was terrible last year. Somehow starts the season in the top 20 just because that's their name. So
yeah,
Michigan, I had high hopes. Might have been a little premature, but I think, both those teams, I would be very surprised to see them in the playoff hunt come, probably late October.
Without a doubt. Michigan's going to lose a couple more games in the Big Ten. And then, yeah, speaking, keep going through the Big Ten lineup, Iowa won. Started off pretty terrible, ended up pulling off a pretty big win. But, man, that offense looked really bad to begin. And speaking of offense and the lack thereof, Nebraska didn't even get a chance to take the field, so that was cool.
No, but Scott Frost is still undefeated.
I don't have a response for that.
He hasn't lost a game in over a year.
Yeah, that doesn't really count. Anyways, and then finally, to round it out for the Big Ten on Friday and Saturday, Indiana narrowly beat Florida International University, and I don't think there's much to say about that other than both teams suck. So who cares?
Yeah, I watched a little bit of the game. It was bad. Indiana, I wouldn't say narrowly beat FIU. The game was never in question in the fourth quarter, but it was not a pretty game to watch. And Indiana's going to be normal Indiana, I think, probably about a 6-win team.
Fair, yeah, and they're going to lose to almost every Big Ten team, so it'll be fun. Awesome. So that kind of recaps the weekend, last weekend. Now we're going to jump into basically the upcoming games. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of good matchups this week. A lot of Big Ten teams going against some real bad teams. So this should be a fun week of domination for the Big Ten. And starting with number 5 Wisconsin taking on New Mexico. Fun fact: these two teams have never played each other, and the Lobos are actually coming off a 62-30 win against Incarnate Word. And I have a question for you.
Yep.
Have you ever heard of this school, and where do you think they're from?
So yes, I have heard of them. I believe their mascot is the Cardinals.
How do you know that?
It's a pointless gift. They're from somewhere in Texas. I couldn't tell you the city, but it's a school in Texas, and I think they're FCS. I don't think they're FBS.
So you're close. They're D2 from San Antonio.
Okay, so they are in Texas.
Yeah, man, that's just impressive. Well, they dominated a win against a team that no one outside of you has ever heard of. But the Lobos are coming off a 3-9 season, and they're just going to get smoked this week.
Yeah, I think the real story is going to be Wisconsin, and if their offense can look a little bit more efficient than they did in their opener against Western Kentucky. Wisconsin's bread and butter this year should be their offensive line, should be running the football. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor, was Jonathan Taylor. However, the offensive line didn't look like what you would expect an offensive line with 3 preseason All-Americans to look like. Cornerbrook got stacked a couple times. Had pressure on him more than that. So they're not going to get tested against New Mexico this week. I think everybody knows that. But it is going to be interesting to see if they can put together a more complete performance. And the one thing I'll say about Jonathan Taylor, he's obviously extremely talented. He needs to clean up the fumbles. Fumbled against Western Kentucky. Last year, he had 8 fumbles, which was the 11th most in the country. That's not good because I think the top 10 were all quarterbacks with maybe one exception. So of all the things that he does really well, he needs to figure out how to hold on to the football. Otherwise, that could be a problem for Wisconsin against some better teams.
Absolutely. And, one other great running back who had fumble issues, Adrian Peterson, still managed to make a career out of it, though. But, yeah, the fumbles need to stop. When you're that good, you need to be able to hold on to the ball. I don't care who you are. That's something you can practice. So not acceptable at this point. So who do you have? Do you have Wisconsin covering the spread of 35?
Yeah. So I think Wisconsin does come out strong. I think they cover 35 at home. New Mexico was 3-9 last year. There's controversy surrounding New Mexico's program. Their head coach Bob Davie had some not so nice allegations earlier this year. Got suspended, didn't get fired. But I think there's too much talent on Wisconsin's team and too much of a question mark on New Mexico.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm taking Wisconsin as well. I don't disagree with anything you said. I just can't pick against Wisconsin at home. They're going to just beat down on them. So moving into Western Michigan at number 21 Michigan. So these teams haven't faced off since 2011. And, I mean, who really would have thought this? But Western Michigan has never beaten Michigan at all, which is really no surprise. Big thing here with Michigan, at least. So Shea Patterson, we talked about on the podcast last week that no one's ever going to hear, that Shea Patterson is one of the first quarterback that, Jim Harbaugh's had at Michigan, who's actually a good quarterback. And he didn't look that great in the last game, and he got injured. So he's questionable for Saturday, and we may be seeing one of the next great McCaffreys, Dylan McCaffrey, see some time in the game against Western Michigan, whether that's because Patterson's injured or whether that's because Michigan actually plays a good game and beats Western Michigan like we expect them to.
Yeah, so I mean, Western Michigan, I think, is your typical MAC team. I think they're very up for 1 year and then down for probably 2 years, and then when they get another senior class, they're back up. 2 years ago, they went 13-1, lost to Wisconsin in the Cotton Bowl. Had Corey Davis on that team, who went on to be a high draft pick in the NFL. last year, after losing him and losing PJ Fleck, who's now at Minnesota as the coach, they went 6-6. I have trouble picking Michigan. Michigan's favored 28 points. So I am going to take Western Michigan to cover the 28. I think Shea Patterson can play. Everything that I've read says, he was taken out because he was cramping up. It's not going to be anything serious. Probably doesn't need to play the whole game. But I'm going to take Western Michigan to cover points against Michigan.
I really wanted to take Western Michigan, but I can't. All right, let's go. I'm going Michigan.
All right.
You put me in a bind there. I wasn't ready for that. I really thought you were going to go with Michigan there for a second, but oh well. The Western Michigan Broncos uniforms are terrible, so I really can't ever root for a team like that. All right, so Duke at Northwestern. So these two teams are basically the battle of the public, or not the public, but the Power 5 Ivy League schools. Surprisingly, Duke actually beat Northwestern last year when Northwestern actually was having a pretty good season. They beat them 41-17, despite the fact that Duke wasn't nearly as talented as Northwestern. I think for Northwestern, kind of the big storyline is that they're coming off I want to say big, but that's not really the right term. More of just an important conference win over Purdue in their race for fourth place. So that's exciting for them. It was actually a decent game that I enjoyed watching until the Broncos preseason game came on, and unfortunately Purdue at Northwestern just doesn't get me going a ton. So and then as far as the Northwestern team, though, Jeremy Larkin looked really good. He was all over the freaking place. Rushed for 143 yards on 26 carries and 2 touchdowns. So not to jump the gun here, but Northwestern is favored by 3, and I'm picking Northwestern to cover. I think they're going to win by double digits against Duke.
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with you. I'm also taking Northwestern and giving 2 points. Duke's an interesting team, though. So when I think about Duke and Northwestern football, it's kind of like they're the same team. They're both teams that are well coached. I think David Cutcliffe went into Duke a little while ago and actually made them a football team. Growing up and remembering the Duke teams of the late 2000s, they were a doormat in the ACC. Now they're, a pretty perennial bowl team. They went 7-6 last year, expected to be around that again. I just think that Northwestern, they've got a little bit of the revenge factor, having lost to Duke last year. And I think Thorson, when he gets fully healthy, he's only 9 months back from an ACL tear. I think he is an NFL draft pick. I don't know what round he'll go, but I think he's got that kind of arm. I think Fitzgerald's a good coach, and ultimately I think Northwestern probably wins by about 10 points.
I think I heard a hot take in there. Are you saying Thorson is the next Trevor Siemian?
No. I think Thorson's got a little bit more talent than Trevor Siemian, though Trevor Siemian, for whatever reason, has started games in the NFL. I've never quite understood it, unless the Broncos quarterbacks were really just that bad.
Yeah, I would go with that bad. Funny story about Duke, and speaking of the terribleness that they were in the 1990s, my first video game was NCAA, I want to say 98, and I didn't know how to play it or how to win. And so I picked the very best team in the game, Florida State, and I played the very worst team in the game, Duke. And I ran the ball every single play. I put it on 4 quarters of 1-minute quarters, and I won my first game. And from there, I became unstoppable.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Eastern Michigan at Purdue. This game isn't going to be overly fun to watch, but Purdue is favored by 16.5. Eastern Michigan won their first week game 51-17 against Monmouth, and Eastern Michigan actually features backup quarterback from last year, Iowa's backup quarterback at least, Tyler Weigers, who actually played pretty well last week. So he was a 3-star recruit coming into Iowa. They do have some talent on the team. I just can't imagine. You know what? No, I can't imagine Purdue losing this. I'm going to go Eastern Michigan on this one.
Eastern Michigan straight up or against the spread?
Against the spread. I'm not that stupid.
Okay. So the spread's 16.5. So I got a question for you now. So Eastern Michigan played a Big Ten last year and won. Guess who that team was?
I'm just gonna quickly Google this.
Yeah, see, that's not guessing. So
Let me guess.
no, it's too late. It was Rutgers. They beat Rutgers last year.
That's not a real Big Ten team.
Technically though it is. Purdue's a better team. I think Purdue's going to be pretty upset that they lost their opener to Northwestern. Talent-wise, it's not a competition. I know you said Eastern Michigan has some talent, but I don't think they'll be able to pass protect or run block. I'm going to go with Purdue to cover the 16.5 at home and get back on the winning track.
Nice. I can't wait to sneak that victory out from underneath you. Ohio State, number 4 Ohio State takes on Rutgers. God, I feel bad for Rutgers. I will say this. Ohio State's defense didn't look that good against Oregon State. It was kind of a shootout, and with how much talent Ohio State continually has on defense, I really expected it to be more of, like 70-7 or something like that. So interesting enough, I really thought Ohio State's defense looked bad. Tate Martell is definitely going to get in this game, though. Ohio State is favored by 35, and this is kind of going out on a limb, but I really think Ohio State's going to put a beat down on them. Dwayne Haskins is going to throw about, I'm going to go 5, let's go 6 touchdowns in the first half, and Tate Martell is going to take over in the second half and show everyone why he was a 4-star recruit out of Bishop Gorman.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that's going out on the limb at all. Talk about Ohio State struggling a little bit on defense. Oregon State was a terrible team last year. They went 1-11, but they did score some points against some decent teams. It was never going to be a game. I think everybody knew that, and I think the defense probably knew that too. I think they'll probably get a little bit from their coaches about showing up for the full time against Rutgers, and even if they don't, Rutgers isn't stopping Ohio State's offense. I think Ohio State probably puts up between 60 and 70 points. They're going to win by probably between 40 and 50. So I'm going to take Ohio State to cover 35. And I don't feel great about it because 35 points is a lot. I just don't see how Rutgers makes this a game in any way.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking about this. You want to make a prop bet on how many touchdowns Tate Martell throws?
Throws or contribute? I think he runs for him before he throws for him.
I'll go overall touchdowns, throwing and running.
All right,
I'm gonna say 3.
All right, I'll take the under.
Okay. Awesome. So the next game on the list is Colorado at Nebraska, and we're finally going to see this, wonderful Scott Frost-led Nebraska team play a game. But unfortunately for them, they have to take on Colorado, who is supposed to be pretty decent this year. And most teams like to have a nice warm-up game before they take on a challenging opponent, but Nebraska kind of has to come in a little bit cold to this game. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I think it's a tough situation for Nebraska. So Colorado played Colorado State in week 1. Colorado State's probably not going to be very good, but Colorado looked really good. They won 45-13. Their quarterback, who is a returner from last year, finished 22 of 25 through 4 touchdowns. So extremely accurate in that game. Their starting running back averaged over 10 yards a carry. They totaled over 600 yards of offense. And yeah, it was against Colorado State, but if there's something I'm worried about with Nebraska this year, it's going to be their defense. We're light in the secondary. Linebackers in front should be okay, but we don't actually know because we didn't get to watch them play Akron. And Colorado's defense also held Colorado State to under 300 yards of offense, which in a college football game is pretty tough to do. So Colorado was 5-7 last year. They still have a questionable pass rush, but it is not the ideal opening game for Nebraska. It would have been a lot better if they were able to get their legs under them against Akron, be able to take what they need to improve between week 1 and week 2. With all that said, and me talking of Colorado, Scott Frost, who is the hero that Nebraska deserves, he sounded pretty confident in the press conference yesterday. said his team had the best practice that they had all season. I think people look at that Colorado game, look at the score against Colorado State, and the line has actually gone down. So it's currently sitting at Nebraska -5. Yeah, I'm taking Nebraska for sure. I think Nebraska will come out fired up. I think the team's going to be antsy to play and a little bit, wired and ready to go. But if I'm actually going to make a bet on that game, because I think Nebraska's defense is going to be their weak point this year, and their offense with Scott Frost leading the charge is going to be very, very strong. The over-under on this game is set at 64. I think they're going to get into 70 pretty easy. So if I was going to make, an actual money bet on this, I'm taking the over, and I'm taking Nebraska -5.
That's fair. I would follow you to my death with the over-under at 64. I love betting on people scoring a lot of points, and that sounds like a lot of fun to me. I'm going to disagree with you on Nebraska covering, and I'm going to go with Colorado. And for no actual reason other than I want to see Nebraska lose, and I live in Colorado. So if you're listening to this and you're trying to make a bet, for the love of God, do not listen to what I'm saying right now. I know this will probably be a loss. I'm trying to will it into existence.
I'm going to be pretty pissed if that happens.
Yeah, that would really suck, but it'd be quite the first game for Scott Frost. I mean, I feel bad for the program. It has been depressing watching Nebraska play the last couple of years. Mostly because I see you it's bad watching you when Nebraska loses. So it'll be nice to see them maybe win a couple games and then lose to Iowa at the end of the season. And before you can come back to that, speaking of Iowa, the next game on the docket for Saturday is Iowa State at Iowa, the big Cy-Hawk rivalry. Kind of similar situation in Nebraska, but in inverse, ISU's game was canceled, so they are coming in without playing a game against Iowa. This game will be good regardless. Iowa State's actually not bad. Last year they made their first bowl game under Matt Campbell, the first time in 6 seasons. And Iowa, to be honest, didn't look super great. Even in their blowout victory against NIU, their offense was garbage. I think the big key to this game is whether David Montgomery can destroy Iowa's run defense. Kirk Ferentz made a comment that, although a questionable comment, made a comment that David Montgomery might be the best back that Iowa sees all season. I think he might have forgot about Jonathan Taylor and that he's coming to Kinnick in 3 weeks. But so that'll be really interesting. Iowa really struggled against the run at NIU. If it wasn't for the 5 quarterback sacks counting against the total rushing yards, they would have averaged about 5.5 yards per carry, and they reeled off a couple runs over 10 yards. So that'll be kind of the storyline to watch. Iowa is favored by 3.5, and I'm taking that all day. Go Hawks, baby. I think it's gonna be close, but they're gonna win by I'm gonna say 10.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. Iowa State, similar to Nebraska, got kind of screwed out of their first game with the weather. They were supposed to have a tune-up against South Dakota State. Didn't get to play that. A lot of coaches do say, and I think Frost actually said this, that you usually see your biggest improvement with your team between week 1 and week 2, actually getting out there and playing a game. And I mostly just feel bad for Iowa State. So they had a terrible start to their schedule, not having played South Dakota State. Their first 4 games, they're going to play at Iowa. Then they get Oklahoma at home, who's ranked 6th in the country. And they get Akron at home. So hopefully they give a beat down to Akron, who refused to play on Sunday against Nebraska. But then they go to TCU, to Oklahoma State, and get West Virginia at home, who's also a ranked team. So Iowa State really needs to win this game. Otherwise, they risk going back to what they were 2-3 years ago and not making a bowl game again. So they need it, but I don't think they're going to get it. I hate doing it, but once again, I think Iowa covers 3.5 points. I'm not going to pick against them out of spite. I prefer winning over making a point. So I think Iowa covers 3.5. Sorry, Iowa State. Might be another long year.
I am a very spiteful person, and I will all day pick teams out of spite. Maryland and Bowling Green. We don't need to talk about this for more than about 15 seconds, but Maryland's favored by 16.5. They beat Texas again last week, which is just hilarious. The fact that Maryland's favored by 16.5 just speaks to how bad Bowling Green is. I'm taking Bowling Green in this one.
They talk about how bad Bowling Green is. Bowling Green.
Dude, I think last week was a fluke with Maryland, and I think Bowling Green is, despite being very bad, capable of covering 2 touchdowns in a game. So I don't think they're going to win, but I do think they're going to make it close, and I do think Maryland will ultimately win.
So it's not at Maryland. It is at Bowling Green. I think that does make a little bit of a difference. I'm also going to take Bowling Green getting 16.5 points at home. I agree with you. I think Maryland was out to prove a point last week with the controversy surrounding the program. I think that takes a little bit of a backseat this week, and they win, but they don't win by more than 16.5.
Absolutely. And transitioning from one crappy game to another, we have Virginia at Indiana. Indiana won last week by 10. This week Indiana won last week by 10, and Virginia last week beat Richmond 42-13. Richmond is not a very good team in general. And I think kind of similar line. This game just sucks. But Indiana is favored by 6.5. It is at Indiana. I struggle. This is just a toss up. I'm going to go with Virginia just because. Why not? There's no real rhyme or reason for this one. Indiana is bad, so is Virginia. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, similar to Duke and Northwestern playing each other, Virginia and Indiana, I think, is going to be like watching paint dry a little bit. It's going to be two of the same team playing against each other, and it's a game I don't really care about. I think Indiana probably wins the game, but I'm going to take Virginia to cover 6.5 because I don't think either team is really going to be better than the other. So home team wins this one, but I think Virginia can cover 6.5.
Man, we are not getting creative on our picks. We are pretty much going neck and neck together, except for my confident move in Colorado. So the next game, we literally won't talk about this for more than this next sentence. Western Illinois, there is no line. Both teams are terrible, and we are going to move on to Fresno State at Minnesota. So Fresno State is, I think, a kind of a sneaky pick to win this game. Minnesota's only favored by 2.5. Florida State put the beat down on Idaho last week. Idaho is nothing to write home about, but Fresno State is a good team. Last year they were ranked for the last couple of weeks of the season. They lost in their championship or their conference championship and ended up going 10-4. But like I said, they were ranked for a couple games in the season, and Minnesota isn't very good despite their big win last week. Their team just doesn't look very great. They're starting a true freshman quarterback. He, I think, fumbled deep in their end zone or deep in their territory on one play. Didn't have very good passing statistics. Thankfully, they have a couple senior running backs who can kind of carry the load. But I feel like Fresno State's going to come into Minnesota and win, and unfortunately upset, or not so unfortunately, upset all of our good Minnesota friends who pretend to like the Gophers.
Yeah, Fresno State's a weird team. 2 years ago, they were pretty terrible, and then last year they were looking for a new coach, and they ended up hiring Jeff Tedford, who's the former Cal coach, and they got a little bit of flack for that. They didn't seem to actually do much of a search before hiring him. But kind of similar to what Scott Frost did with Central Florida, Tedford turned Fresno State from an 11-loss team to a 10 in 1 year. His quarterback is back. He's a kid from Oregon State who transferred. Their real big question mark is their defensive line, which doesn't bode well for them against a Minnesota team that's going to be relying pretty heavily on the run. Their running back last week, Rodney Brooks, rushed 24 times for 153 yards. That doesn't really mean anything against a New Mexico State team who, against Wyoming, gave up almost 200 yards rushing. But it is something to watch, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that matchup plays out. I think Fresno State will probably end up putting, probably 7 or 8 in the box for most plays. Ultimately, I think this game's a coin flip. I think people are really high on Fresno State, and I think Fresno State's good. I have trouble picking against Minnesota at home in another one where I think the talent is going to be pretty equal. So I will end up taking Minnesota, and I think it's going to come down to the fact that I don't think Fresno State is going to be able to stop them on the ground.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair opinion. This will be an interesting one to watch, and I'm kind of excited because this will help me gain a lead in our standings, considering you're the expert gambler.
So just so you're aware, this is the fourth game that we've picked differently so far today.
Really? It seems like we've picked every game together.
No, you got to pay attention.
Let me see. Oh shoot, you're right.
I know.
Yeah, okay. This will be okay. This will be interesting. All right, so another game I have a feeling we might be picking differently on this one. But number 13 Penn State is traveling to Pitt, so in-state rivalry. Yeah, I mean that's not much to say about that. As far as the overall series, Penn State is winning 51-43. There's weirdly enough 4 ties in the history of the series. I don't know how you tie 4 times within 100 games. So that's interesting. A couple things we talked about already today, but Penn State looked bad against Appalachian State. Granted, Appalachian State knows how to get up for big games. Trace McSorley is not the heir apparent to Johnny Manziel as he's been compared to in the past. He's a very average quarterback, and to be honest, I don't think I'd want to be his friend either. He kind of looks like a jerk. So going against a Pitt team that returned 7 starters on defense and a burgeoning quarterback in Kenny Pickett. I know he's a former 3-star, but he's doing pretty well and had a solid game into the first game of the season. I think with the line being 8.5 Penn State, I'm taking Pitt at home. I think Penn State's not going to figure it out, and it's going to be a tough game. With that being said, I have a feeling that it's either going to go one way or the other, right? Pitt's going to win by 7, or Penn State's going to win by 40. I'm just hoping it's Pitt today.
Yeah, I don't want to overreact to Penn State having one bad game. But that being said, I wasn't super high on Penn State going into the season. However, Pittsburgh's a weird team. They weren't good last year until the end of the season. And then they played Virginia Tech tight. I think Virginia Tech won that game by 6, and it actually beat Miami to end the season last year. So they do have a little bit of momentum if you want to carry that over. Albany, who they're the Great Danes, by the way. They beat Albany last year. That doesn't tell us anything. I think Penn State bounces back. The last time they played at Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh did win, but I gotta think Penn State's going to want to prove a point. And I really don't think Pittsburgh is a very good team, so I'm going to take Penn State to cover 8.5.
Awesome, man. Okay, never mind. We are going against each other on pretty much at least half the games. So, and I have a feeling we're going to do this again because I get really cocky and start betting on games that I, for some reason, want to just be cool about and tell you next week that I'm awesome and right, and then they end up losing. So with that being said, number 15 Michigan State takes on Arizona State at Arizona State. These two teams haven't faced each other in over 40 years. I think 40 years. So that's kind of 30 years.
86 is not 40 years.
30 math, man. Math. My wife's a math teacher. Over 30 years, sorry. And it'll be interesting. I think one of the things that is often not spoke about is the time zone difference. When you travel, and I know Michigan State's in Central time zone, but traveling to Arizona State, I believe it's now a 2-hour time difference with daylight savings in Arizona. It's an 8:45 p.m. game, which would be 10:45 Michigan State time. You can look at different statistics of teams traveling cross country, and it's not typically going to bode well for those teams. Arizona State is not a sleeper pick to win a bunch of games this year. They're projected to be about middle of the pack, maybe 6-7 wins. But you always got to believe in Herm Edwards, the brilliant motivator that I don't understand how people are motivated by him. But anyways, with Herm Edwards coming into the second game after a big win against UTSA, and by big I mean an expected win, I actually do expect ASU to win this game. Michigan State isn't a bad team. They had a bad game last week against Utah State, but my biggest thing is going all the way to Tempe. ASU knows how to get down and party, and I think those students are going to be lit and ready to go for that game. So I think it's going to be a tough environment for Michigan State to come into, and I think ASU is going to pull out a big victory.
Yeah, so we're actually going to agree on this one. I was down on Michigan State before the start of the season. They didn't do anything to prove me wrong last week. They got in my opinion, a little bit lucky to get out a win against Utah State. They had to come back in the fourth quarter to win that game. Um, and you know what? Going to Arizona State, which is a pretty big party school, it's a night game. Michigan going to be traveling. They get 2 hours, but it's still going to be, like you said, about 11 p.m. Central Time before that game kicks off for them. So Michigan State's favored 6.5. If there was a game that I was looking to get a plus line on and just take straight up money line, it would be Arizona State to win this game straight up. So the 6.5 points Michigan State is giving makes me think Arizona State even more. Probably the most confident that I'm going to be with an upset maybe this whole year is I think Arizona State not only covers, but I think they win the game straight up.
Is it bad that when you say you want to bet on something that I've already bet on, I want to reverse and go with Michigan State?
Do whatever you want to do, man.
No, I'm going to stick with ASU. I just think it's funny. All right, so with that being said, that's kind of the recap of the overview of the upcoming games. I think it'll be an exciting week of a lot of blowout wins and potentially a few upsets for the Big Ten this week. Ryan, is there anything you want to add before we close out our third episode?
Just one more quick note on that last game. Michigan State gave up 320 passing yards to Utah State. Arizona State's receiver, N'Keal Henry, I think he had 140 yards and 2 touchdowns last week in their opener. They are going to struggle to deal with him, and as hyped up as that team's going to be, bet on Arizona State, people.
Yeah, he's 6'4" and moves so smoothly. I don't know if you saw his play where he juked out like 3 people in the span of about 4 seconds, but I don't know how a guy that big can move like that. I consider myself agile, and I can't move like that. So it'll be fun to see. I'll openly admit I might be asleep by the time that game ends, considering it's not going to end until about midnight my time. But it'll be fun to see the highlights from the next day. So with that being said, we'll be coming back at you after next week, give you kind of a recap of this week's game, week 2 of the true week 2 of the college football season. No one really cares about that first actual week. And we'll be giving you an overview of the third week of college football. Thank you all for listening. Please feel free to give an awesome review on iTunes. This will be our first episode, I believe, on iTunes. And we will talk to you all in a week.